With NoCodeXpress, you can create reusable UI components and use those components anywhere in your application. That way, you can always eliminate duplicate UI elements in your application. To bind data and events to the component, you can use the MVVM pattern. Let me demonstrate how to develop components with NoCodeXpress. First, let's create a layout. Just add two titles to both of sides. We'll call this parent component. Let's change the font size. Let's copy paste it on the other side and let's call that the child component. Let's create a new component by clicking on the create new item toolbar button and you can select blank UI component. For this component, we'll call it sample UI component. Let's just adjust the size of it. Let's make it 800 pixels by 800 pixels. And let's drag and drop a calendar component, which is a pre-built component in NoCodeXpress. And let's add a button. So the purpose is to, select the date from the calendar and transfer that value to the parent component. So we'll call this button send selected date to parent component. Let's just make it look beautiful. To transfer data to the parent component, you need to create an event. Under properties, let's call this the onSubmit event and let's select event as the data type. And also we need to create a state variable to hold the selected date. And let's bind the state variable to the calendar control. And let's add an event to send the state variable to the parent component. Let's add an event. And you can get the state variable by adding a sequence of blocks. It's in the current scope, so we'll call it current scope and let's get the selected date and assign that to a variable called event data, which is the data that we are going to send it to the parent component. And there's a block called trigger event that you can use to trigger an event in the component, and let's send the event data to the parent. Now the new component you have created is listed in the toolbar. Let's drag and drop it. And yeah, we also need to add a label to show the data that is received from the component. Let's just change the UI a little bit to make it easier to read things. And once we receive the data from the child component, we need to assign that to a state variable in the parent component. So we'll call it child selected date. And let's bind that to the label. And when we select the child component that we have created, you can add the event handler for that. And you can access the data from the event variable. And when you bind it to the state variable in the parent component, which is child selected date, and let's run it. So when you select a date, so it will be listed in the parent component. Now let's add a label to show some data that is received from the parent component to the child component, and let's make it look like a title. Let's increase the font size. Let's add another property to get the title from the parent component. We'll call that the title variable. And let's bind that variable to the parent, sorry, the label. And let's also add a text box to the text box will send data to child component from the parent component. We call parent title, then let's bind that state variable to the text box and also to the child component. And let's run this app. Yes, and when you change the data in the text box, it will be changed in the child component as well.